Not how I fucking want things to be.
So why was I different from other kids? As a child I already understood that I did not choose to be born. So therefore, why should I be expected to act in a certain way and respect the ways of the world? It wasn't my choice to exist here, but now I should be burdened with all this shit? So why couldn't I call my parents thieves and whores? Because they irritated me. I actually loved how it irritated them when I did that. I got into such an obsession with doing that despite knowing how much I will get punished for it, I just couldn't control myself. Whenever anger and frustration would well up in me, I would just blurt "thief and whore" at my mother, and it felt like I wasn't even choosing to do that. It was just happening on its own. Now, to punish me for that, my mother would lead me to believe into all sorts of horrible things, that I am a monster, that with one phone call I could be taken to jail for saying something like that to my parents, that I should be kicked out of the house and find out what it's like to live on the streets with criminals by myself if I am so unhappy at home. I would be dragged toward the door of the house while having been previously convinced that if I am ever alone outside, some pedophiles or serial killers might grab me. I was made scared to be alone outside, unsupervised, and yet I was made to believe I will be thrown out there alone and left abandoned to get attacked by these people in punishment for my behavior. Because of this mind-fucking I received, I never knew or believed the law could be on my side. That's how they fucked with my head, taking advantage that I'm a little kid who doesn't know any better, so they can abuse me and make me feel like I'm the bad one, and they are the victims. Because of this, I always mistakenly thought that I am the troublemaker, I am the horrible one. Yet it never really bothered me, and I was so addicted to creating this chaos, this crazy chaos, that a few short words could thrust me and my parents into, that I couldn't help myself, and I would just blurt those horrendous words at my parents all the same. Yeah, I say horrendous in quotation marks because I'm being sarcastic. I knew I would get abused for it. I would be made to believe the cops are coming to take me away to jail for doing that. My mother had even convinced some teenage kid who was our neighbor to punish me for it by painfully wringing my arm behind my back, and he would do this for hours, demanding I explain why I treat my mother so terribly. And I had no idea how to explain it, what was being asked of me. All I knew that I was being tortured, and I couldn't stop myself from triggering more of this abuse in the future. I can imagine Skylar living with his abusive mother. I don't know just how badly abusive she may have been, but I'm pretty sure she turned him into a latchkey kid. I don't have any inside knowledge here, by the way. Most of this is speculation and educated guesses based on what I heard in the news. But with my imagination, it isn't hard to fill in the blanks, especially when they have already been pretty much filled in by the news anyway. So I imagine his mother's character is something very bitchy, frustrated and entitled and impossible to get along with. I bet she didn't do a single thing around the house, but bitched at the kids to do everything. And any time one little thing was out of place, she probably bitched even more. This is a mother who would run off to party into the early morning and leave Skylar to babysit his half-brother and do all kinds of shit around the house while she's getting drunk. That would be stressful enough for Skylar, especially dealing with his parents' divorce at an early age, but then you're forced to care for some kid that came into your life because of the whole mixed family situation, and that's after your parents got divorced. I personally know I couldn't be a babysitter for any kid at that age, at 16, especially if I was forced to share living space with that little kid and be annoyed by him. I was a very private person when I was a teenager, and that's because everyone wanted to bully and judge me for the way I was. So to avoid being negatively judged, I never opened up to anyone. I kept all my likes and dislikes a secret. I didn't want to show any weaknesses someone might exploit to make fun of me. So if I was forced to share my existence, my privacy with some kid, I'd probably have killed him too. When I was 12, my mother married, and my stepfather was a sensible man, so I was no longer getting physically abused by her. Besides, I got too old, and my mother couldn't physically overpower me anymore. She became afraid of me. She became afraid of me because I was no longer afraid to hurt her. But if I was forced to share my private space with anyone, I'd probably have killed them too, because I was willing to protect my privacy and secrecy any way it takes. I was not going to be judged by anyone. I was not going to be interrupted while watching TV. I needed my peace. My biggest problem was, and still is, that I didn't have a life outside of home and school. I never went out anywhere because people didn't like me, so I couldn't have any true friends. I was scared to bathe more than once a week because I was told it wastes water, and I'm not paying for the water, so I shouldn't waste it. Because of this, I never was used to bathing every day, so being dirty and smelly never bothered me, but it bothered other people. Skylar was lucky on the other hand. He had a social life. He actually had Facebook friends that responded to him. I can't even talk to anyone on Facebook. I will write a reply to someone's comment, but no one ever comments on my stuff. My replies don't even get replies. The thing is, when someone would bully me, when someone would insult me, I would kind of agree with them. So it never made me mad enough to get into a murderous mood or fight back, because those people weren't really ever wrong. And what I feared most about standing up for myself is that my dissatisfaction with life would have to come out in the open, and if I got in trouble for defending myself, my dissatisfaction with how my parents treated me would come out, and I feared my parents. I feared criticizing them publicly. I feared telling anyone how I felt about them. I feared confronting my demons and looking inside myself. My mother had indoctrinated me to think that I am always the troublemaker. I am always someone who is shaming my parents and wasting their money. And if I create trouble at school for them, then I will be punished for causing them to come to the attention of any authorities and for shaming them publicly. One time, a student counselor called home because I hinted in a piece of homework that I would commit suicide because my parents yelled at me, and it was demanded at home by my parents that I explain why I've done that, why I caused this phone call to happen. I had no idea how I'm supposed to explain anything. I just do what I do. I didn't tell my counselor to make any phone calls home, so why am I held responsible? For instance, going back to when I would call my mother a thief and whore, it was demanded I explain why. I had no idea how to explain it or what she was asking me, so I was tortured like in Guantanamo or something to get me to say and explain something. I have no idea how. She convinced a teenage kid, a neighbor, to wring my arm behind my back for hours until I explained myself, and I had absolutely no clue what I'm supposed to explain, how am I supposed to answer this question. The punishment would just go on for hours. Infuriated bitching from her would just go on for hours at me about how terrible I am, what a monster I am, and I just didn't understand what I can do to stop it. I would be scared because I would feel like the world is ending for me, but I had no idea how to stop it. How long can someone be infuriated by this stuff and not calm down? I never apologized to my mother for doing that to her because I was smart enough to know I am right for doing it, that I am just right. I didn't really know why, I just knew I was not wrong, that my parents were the crazy ones and they were wrong to try and stop me from doing that, but not me, I was right. That I'm not wrong for not living up to this concept of a 10-year-old who always loves his parents and does not call them terrible words. I would feel ashamed at times for doing this, and yet some more rational part of me always knew I am not wrong, so it wasn't letting me give in and apologize. Part of why I reasoned that I shouldn't feel bad and apologize was because they could never explain what hurts them so much about the words I'm calling them. They'd say something like, "Oh, we'd be ashamed if other people heard you treating your mother this way." But that didn't matter to me or even make sense because shame about matters like that is something society invented. I didn't invent the need for my mother to be ashamed of me because I publicly blurt that she's a thief and a whore to piss her off. Society did that. Society said that if you're a parent and your 10-year-old acts this way, then you should be ashamed. But I didn't make it that way. Why is that my problem? Why is this supposed to affect me? Why am I supposed to care and be sympathetic that this will make my mother ashamed? I had a compulsion to blow up on my mother and call her thief and whore, an impulse that I obeyed when I was too young to understand what compulsions and impulses are, or that my brain must be wired improperly to have the proclivity for these things. How am I supposed to explain that at 10 years old to my mother, especially while being tortured into doing so?